Do your children go to school in Melbourne? Are you interested in how their school might be shaping them for the future? I'm Crystal, a regular Melbourne mum interested in all things to do with schools. In this podcast, I want to talk to the people in the education system in Melbourne, including parents, students, and maybe even some principals to get a better understanding of what goes on in schools and how they're shaping our kids. It's time to go to school on the Melbourne Schools podcast. Hi parents, thanks for joining me on the Melbourne Schools podcast. It's been a while between podcasts. Let's face it, life got in the way last year. Let's call this the beginning of season 2. For our first pod of season 2, I have a very interesting guest who I can't wait to chat to. Penny Miller from Families in Mind Design joined Melbourne Schools at the end of 2025 as a sponsor. She has a really interesting and unique business combining child psychology with interior design. So she helps families style and organise their homes not only to look better, but also to help children who live there thrive. So without further ado, welcome Penny.
Thank you, Crystal. I'm really excited for this opportunity to chat today and love everything that you're doing with Melbourne schools.
Oh, thank you very much, Penny, and thank you so much for joining us as part of the Melbourne Schools little family.
My pleasure. It's been wonderful so far.
I'm really interested in your background and how you came to do what you're doing now, because it is really unusual combinations with your child psychology and interior design skills.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think as you mentioned, I have a unique blend of two different worlds. And when I tell people what I do, they go, "Oh yeah, you've definitely niched yourself," which I think has great benefit
Mm.
for the people that I'm helping. So background, I worked for over a decade in the child and family mental health space, both in clinical work and as a researcher. So I worked in schools, community settings, hospitals, private practice. And the themes that emerged time and time again that stood out to me were the importance of the relationships that children have and then the environments that they exist in. So when I became qualified as an interior designer in 2020 during my first parental leave period, the intention wasn't to step away from that career or to head in the direction that I have. But I sort of dipped my toes in the water, and my first few projects and then life as a parent organically led me to doing what I'm doing, keeping in mind that this was during the really heavy COVID lockdown period, and many families
Mm.
were spending more time than ever at home, and really highlighted like whether their homes were fit for purpose or not. And then what I realized was like as I was making choices for my own home, I was trying to make choices that, fit with our aesthetic and suited our style and looked good and all of that. But I realized the demand was different because I had a child in the home now. And so I wanted the pieces to also feel good and function well. And I was naturally inclined to link her development to the choices I was making. And then I realized that this wasn't everyone's inclination and that other
Mm.
parents were really valuing my lens on this overlap between design and development and making changes on a budget and with real life in mind. So I kind of tuned into what the advice families were receiving through the media and through interior design studios. And I realized that the focus was very much on aesthetics and beauty and style and trends, which is important for like enjoying and being proud of your space. But I also noticed very little conversation about development, nervous systems, independence, and the very big shift of emotional experience that happens when you have children come into your home. And so that gap became families in mind design. So
Mm.
yeah, what I see is like I'm not just obviously I'm designing and styling homes and rooms, but I feel like I'm more shaping the conditions of the home to reduce friction and enhance family functioning. And due to my experience working with neurodivergent populations in my previous career and noticing the different temperaments of my own children as I welcomed my second child a couple of years later, it really naturally evolved to more than just family friendly design, but more inclusive and neuro affirming design as well.
Mm. That's so interesting because I think when you think of kids, you think of so many other things like, what sort of extracurriculars are they doing? What school are they going to? You don't really think about that the home environment that they're growing up in. Maybe the people are in their lives, but maybe not like the interior design. So you're saying that that's got a big impact on children's development.
Definitely. I think people underestimate the role of environment. I think if you think about the places where you attended school or
Mm,
the places that you work in and coexist in as an adult, it makes a huge difference whether your experience of that space is a good one or not. And
mm,
our children are young and they're learning so much from the cues of the world around them. And I think we underestimate that we have a real understanding of how spaces exist and what we're meant to do in them and what's expected of us. But children don't have that learning or that understanding yet. And so if spaces are not supporting their learning or development, if they're dysregulating, if they're not fit for their purpose, if they're not safe, all of those things lead to an environment that isn't supporting them. And what you'll notice is not kids saying, like, I don't like this home. They'll just show it through their
mm,
behavior, through like
mm-hmm.
friction, through challenges, through pushback, and through a stressful experience as a parent where you're like constantly redirecting them or you're feeling on edge about what the home is or isn't doing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm actually a believer in that. And it's part of the reason why I'm so interested in schools, like because I do believe that the environment shapes you as a child, especially as a child, because they're so impressionable and so vulnerable when they go into school. And that was part of the reason I started looking at schools because every environment that the school I've been in, every environment of the schools that I've been into has been so different from each other. And I think that has a big impact on kids growing up.
I agree. And I think we now have more understanding and we have more information to have that, I guess, informed lens that when we're going into schools, we're seeing, or, you know, even in childcares and kindergartens, as early
Mm,
as that, you can walk into those spaces and go, oh, do I feel calm? Do I feel nurtured? Do I feel held? Is my kid going to thrive here? Or am I feeling on edge? Is my child going to be safe here? Are they going to understand how to use the space? Are they really accommodated for in this space? And I think a lot of the influence and developmental theories about the impact on space has been very much in the learning environment and it
mm,
hasn't translated super well into what the home environment
yes.
looks like. And I think
Yeah.
because we're busier than ever, we've got schedules that are pushed to the brim. That actually the importance of home is more pronounced than ever. That landing at home and it being grounding and regulating and meeting everyone's needs feels more crucial than ever before.
Can you give me an example? Like, I mean, are you just talking about things like clutter, which I can totally understand how that, affects your mental well-being? But can you give me some examples of like the ideas or the theories about how things work in the home and then how it affects children's behavior?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, a really common one is clutter. And I think we all
Mm.
struggle with the
Yes.
acquisition of things with
Yep.
kids and just the constant evolving of more and more stuff. And that's
Mhm.
not the issue isn't just the amount of stuff, it's the storage not matching behavior or things not having intuitive homes or systems relying on adults, or even just like your immediate storage being used up by things that you don't need all of the time. So just having a more critical lens about redesigning how you zone your systems and your storage and adjusting the visibility and editing items as well and making the maintenance achievable. I think
Mm.
another one that I see a lot is around children struggling to play safely or independently,
Mm.
whether the environment's too stimulating, it's inaccessible, or it's not very defined. It can mean that there's too many options or no kind of clear purpose for the child in that space, or it's not evolving fast enough with them. So they're getting bored and they're seeking input elsewhere. And so it's causing stress and it's relying on parents to kind of redirect them to, like, well, no, this is where you're meant to play and you're meant to do these things, but it's not really meeting their needs anymore.
Mm.
I would definitely say one of the biggest struggles is around sort of those daily frictions around things like shoes being everywhere, bags being dumped, surfaces getting full of things. There's like those
Mm.
constant reminders of, like, oh, I need to do more. Something's not working. I feel
Mm.
overwhelmed. And I am aware as a parent myself that we already get this feeling of not doing enough and being enough. And if you can't keep your home clean, it's a
Mm.
failure. So I see those pockets of mess as opportunities to improve environmental design, not just shift
Mm.
behavior, because sometimes it's the flow that's not making it easy. So things like, having a landing zone or putting hooks at children's heights or
Yes.
having drawers that are labeled. Even I had a client the other week tell me that they were getting really frustrated that their kids were using their headphones every day and putting them on a different surface, and then they couldn't find them or they were getting in the way. And the suggestion was, well, why don't you pop some hooks on a shelving unit so that that's their spot to hang it up when they're finished with it. They can come back. That's where it's going to be when they want to use their, Yoto player or whatever it is next time. And sure enough, it's like eliminated this friction point with something
Mm.
so simple as
So
two like
simple.
two little 3M hooks on a a
Yeah.
clear spot visible to the kids has made this big difference. And I think that's the kind of, if you apply that, extrapolate that out, you could do that for so many things in the home.
Oh, yeah, no, I get it. So, like, things like, school bags and stuff, rather than throwing them around, actually have a hook to leave it on when you walk in, something like that.
Definitely, yeah. So when you
Mm.
come home, there's a clear spot for those things, not only to know where to put them when you get home, but where to
Mm.
find them the next day, and clear spots for paperwork. It's like putting your keys on a hook. It's like you
Yeah.
know where the keys are when you leave the house. There's a lot of mental load for a child
Yes.
of any age in the morning when they're having to remember all the various things to do. So we have to scaffold their executive functioning to be able to sequence what needs to happen next, and we can support their organization. Like that's just one area, but we can
Mm.
support their organization through some of those shifts in how we set up our home.
Mm. And it could be a very simple change, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. There definitely are more complex ones. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you have a child or a family member who's got a lot of sensory sensitivities, it might be that changing the lighting needs to happen, or there's too much visual noise, or there's an issue
Mm.
of sound absorption, or there's too many competing elements, and some of those shifts are a little bit more significant. Or in terms of materials not being as durable or suitable for day-to-day life, like we're finding that the carpet is causing a lot of difficulty because it's getting really dirty and it's not meeting the needs of our day-to-day busy life. So we'd like to get floorboards put in if that's possible, or the paint work wasn't done very well and it's the wear and tear is really showing up, so we want to get new paint and we want to make sure the paints are really durable material. So those kinds of things obviously encounter a little bit more planning and execution, but as you say,
Mm-hmm.
there's some really simple micro shifts that can make a big difference.
Mm. I was reading on your website about your own personal story and your experiences with your own daughters and how they're very different. Can you
Yep.
tell us a bit about that and how you've worked around that with your background?
I definitely can. So I think I've always had the lens of understanding my children's temperament because I've had that professional background, and I've been, sort of assessing their needs through a very professional lens since they were babies. And I can tell you from a very young age, they've been experiencing the world incredibly differently. So
Mm.
one would describe one of them as an orchid child. So she does beautifully when the environment and the conditions are just right, but she's more sensitive to change, to unpredictability, to noise, to sensory input. And the other child is much more of a dandelion. So she's very flexible. She can make almost any situation or setup work. She bounces back quickly when things are shifted. She's very physically driven. So
Mm.
I think the analogy that I have found very meaningful as I see their personalities emerge is that it's like a dandelion that can grow in a crack in the concrete and doesn't need anything in particular to grow and thrive, but an orchid only survives if you look after it a very particular way, but it can thrive and be very beautiful when those
Mm.
conditions are met. So for me and my husband, it was trying to make sure we design a home and set up a home for both of them. And that's taught me a lot because we really try to be equal and fair to both of our kids, but that doesn't always mean identical.
Mm.
So I think on my website, the example is that we tried with a shared bedroom with them, and we wanted that to work. And often that's what parents do with siblings for good reason. And often it's because of space constraints that kids need to share a room. So we were really hopeful it was going to be a positive setup so that we could have them sharing a room and then have a dedicated playroom. And it didn't work out, not because anyone failed or because their relationship isn't rock solid, because it
Mm.
definitely is. It
Mm.
was more that their nervous systems needed different things, and we were seeing negative
Mm.
impacts on their regulation and sleep. And
Mm-hmm.
we do have the luxury of giving them individual bedrooms, so that's where we've landed. But there are also other things that we've done, in our living spaces to think about what their different regulation systems are requiring through the day.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So now that they have different bedrooms, like how have you set it up differently for a dandelion child compared to an orchid child? I'm really interested because I have an orchid child, and she's very
Yeah,
sensitive, like to her environment, and yeah, I realized that I was also an orchid child growing up, like learning a bit more about her. Like, I realized that I am very similar to her. So I respond to my environment as well, and very sensitive to noise and light and that sort of thing. So I'd be really interested, like, how have you set it up differently for both of them?
great question. And I think the evidence suggests that 1 in 5 children is probably considered an orchid, like a highly
Hmm.
sensitive child to all the input in their day, not just environment, but in every other way. So
Yes.
it's not this really tiny minority. There's a lot of orchids out there that need these specific conditions to really blossom. So what I've seen and how they interact with their bedrooms based on how we've set it up is that the orchid really uses her space for regulation and for downtime and retreating. And so
Hmm.
it's meant that the layout of the room has been set in place and it's not really changing because change is hard for her. So
Hmm.
trying to keep that consistent and predictable. And then when we're introducing elements, it's very much getting her buy in for those things. It's collaborating with her on that. So it's not abrupt and it's not something that she doesn't want. So she can sort of really advocate for, well, that's not something I would appreciate in my space.
Hmm.
So for her, it's like something like reading or listening to music is a very calming, grounding activity for her. So making sure in her room she has access to those things at all times. And she can go to her room and express, I need space. And then it's a case of really advocating and following through for that with a sibling who may not be so respectful of that all of the time and want to connect by being with her. So then in my dandelions room, she's a bit more flexible. So as we've needed to change things up or I've needed to add things in, she's a bit more like, yeah, that's fine. Like, no problem. I kind of like that. Or if we're adding a bit more personality, she's like, yeah, I love that, rather than it being like, oh, I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
So for her, with her movement needs as well, I really had to restrain myself to not fill it with more stuff, to overstyle it or to make it look, picture perfect. I was like, it's okay to leave this floor space empty because she likes a lot of movement to regulate. So it's better for her to have that space in there
Um,
we've got a My Milk bean bag, a lily pad that she can like go and crash and bounce into and safely. And so making space for that in her room made much more sense. And I don't need to do that for my orchid child. So it's I think we approach it in a way that they both know their rooms are safe and they're unique to them and they support them. And it shows that we understand them, even though they don't look matchy matchy.
No, listening to you talk about that, I mean, it makes so much sense because, I mean, your orchid child obviously needs the downtime, and then having another sibling sort of crash in there bouncing around, I mean, that wouldn't work if they shared a room. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, when you put it like that, it seems really obvious. And I think
Mm,
the challenge is when you don't have the luxury of space,
yes.
how do you make that work and how do you zone the rest of your house to maybe allow for the regulation to occur in a shared
Mm,
living space or somewhere else, and getting really creative with some of those solutions.
mm. So when clients come to you, like what sort of clients normally come to you coming for advice?
So they almost always mums of
Obviously.
who are feeling overwhelmed.
Yep.
They've got preschool age children or school age children,
Uh-huh.
and they're looking for some solutions because they've got to a point where they go, something's not working. And I think where they're coming to me at and where I meet them at is very much around validation and relief, because I
Mm.
know as a mum how much invisible cognitive load I carry around all the things I notice day to day for the home to be improved to work better for them, for my kids. And I know that that's a shared experience by many parents.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes they'll be just saying, like, accumulatively, day to day, things are, there's lots of conflict, there's lots of tension. I just feel like I'm doing constant reminders. There's something that has to shift, but I don't really quite know what it is. Or maybe they're like, I know that I'd like to, my child's growing out of their bedroom, so I need to convert it from a cot to a bed, and they need to have some less baby things, more childlike things, but I don't really know where to start, and I don't know where to shop, and I don't know how to make a color palette feel cohesive, and I really want to make it unique and personality driven, but not overwhelming. So there, a lot of the mums are just looking for someone to kind of sit alongside them and say, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Let's prioritize. Here's what matters right now. So I think for them, I become a real thinking partner and a partner
Mm-hmm.
to work out a sequence of events and to break it down, map the order, troubleshoot the key friction points. Let's like get some wins on the board to see like that motivation shift for everyone, and sort of staging it so it feels manageable. And I would say that the key transition points, like I said, are like a kid aging out of their room or their setup, or there's a need to sort of rejig the layout, whether there's a parent who needs to work from home now, or they need to accommodate a spare bedroom for visiting parents. You know, they need to shift the way that their home's set up. Perhaps they're moving house, or they moved
Mm.
house a while ago and they're still not feeling like it's finished, or they're not settled, or that strong sense of belonging. And I definitely get a lot of inquiries from families who their children are about to start school, or they're
Right.
transitioning from primary to secondary school. So kind of knowing that something might need to change in the setup to support their learning and their education as well.
So would it be something like from primary to secondary school, setting up like a study space for them, something like that?
Definitely, yeah. I think that that sense of needing to have a dedicated workspace that allows them to independently do their homework and feel supported to do homework, or just having a system in place where they know where they can store all of their belongings so they can promote their sense of organization and staying on top of things. Or because, you know, generally at a high school level, there's more extracurricular activities. So it's identifying what storage solutions might be needed for extra kit, you know, for sporty equipment or musical instruments, and trying to work out where all those extra things are going to go rather than just being dumped in the hallway. And for kids to build their sense of autonomy with how they stay on top of their schedule. So maybe it's putting in some more systems around notice boards or visual calendars or visual reminders to help, you know, sequence their days for key transitions, whether it's before school or after school or on the weekends.
Mm, makes sense. Before you also mentioned neurodivergent families, like how do you help them?
I have a lot of clients who come to me with neurodivergence, whether it's
Mm.
the parents, the children, or both.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a parent who's neurodivergent, you know, for example, they've got ADHD, they get this absolute paralysis with, they know something needs to change. They know there's like a project that needs to be tackled, but they're just absolutely stuck with the mountain of the work that might follow. And so they just don't do anything, which is really
Mm-hmm.
key of the ADHD brain. So for me, how I might help a parent like that is saying, like, I can see that you've got good style, good taste, you're attuned to your kids' needs. It's really just about supporting you to get it done. So like let's chat it through. Let me come into your home. You just walk me through the space so that you can tell me exactly where the bits are. You don't need to synthesize the knowledge. You don't need to summarize it for me. You just talk to me. And then I will make the notes and I will synthesize it for you. And then we'll set up something like a Trello board where we really like break it down and we assign tasks, we set deadlines to sequence those things bit by bit to make it more manageable. And I find that's really beneficial for the neurodivergent parents that I work with. And then
Mm.
for the kids who are neurodivergent, I think it's a lot of that stuff I was talking about with sensory sensitivities, and
Yeah.
having that additional lens that the importance of home is much higher, because they've usually been at school or kinder or whatever it is all day, and they're absolutely depleted or exhausted from managing the cognitive load and the mental demand and the masking. And
Mm.
they don't have the choice of how they regulate in those settings all of the time. So then home becoming a place where it's definitely regulating for them, and they can see it's kind of right in front of them. The things that they need are accessible to them, the things are at their height. They have the freedom to explore what tools they want or need. The materials, the lighting, everything kind of suits what's going to be good for their nervous system. So I would say every kid that I work with who's neurodivergent, there's no one size fits all for
Mm.
what we apply, but I definitely apply that critical lens of let's understand your neurotype, your profile first, and then we can work out what tweaks we can make to really make it feel like your bedroom or the home feels like a safe and connected space.
Mm. And I guess that's where like your expertise in child development comes in, because you would have a great understanding of neurodivergence and all the different kinds of neurodivergence around.
I like to think so. I don't think there's
Mm.
many designers who have that experience or that lens. I think there's definitely a push in the sector to be more inclusive and accessible and universal in design approaches so that people aren't having to constantly advocate for accommodations. But
Mm.
I do think it's something that parents who have neurodivergent children already feel the burden of self education and
Yeah.
understanding their child's unique needs, because no child on the autism spectrum, for example, is like any other child on the autism spectrum. So I think I feel really proud that I get to come in, and privileged that I get to come into their homes and their spaces and get trusted, not just
Mm.
with setting up an aesthetic, beautiful space, but like also having their well-being in my hands. Like that just, yeah, it feels like something I'm really grateful that I get to impart onto other
Mm.
families.
I can imagine not just neurodivergent parents, but just parents in general. Like, for example, me would be would be quite intimidated getting an interior designer to come in and look at the cluttered space. And I've got like a million pets as well. As I live in a multi
Mhm.
generational household too,
Mhm.
so it's quite intimidating for me to say, "Can you come in and help me?" But it sounds like you're not the standard sort of interior design person. Would I be?
I would like to think so. Yeah, it makes my heart break when parents
Yeah.
feel this sense of shame about their homes and how it's set up, or it's like I couldn't possibly invite someone into my home
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to critique what I've done, or it's so far gone, there's nothing they can do, or how embarrassing. And I think social media has a lot to blame for that, that we see these portrayals of what
mm.
designed and styled homes should look
Mm.
like, and it's not realistic. And I think it's off-putting, and it leaves families feeling less than. And I really appreciate why families feel intimidated, and I liken it to, if I'm outsourcing to an industry that I don't fully understand, I find
Mm.
that process intimidating because I don't understand maybe what they're going to do, or how much it's going to cost, or
Yep.
is it going to blow out to something beyond the means that I have. And I do think that a lot of my work isn't very glamorous. And so I come into a space and I see how real families are living and the chaos of it. And I don't
Mm.
think it's broken. I do think there's opportunity, and families just need guidance and support and compassion. And some of the changes that I make, just they wouldn't even be perceptible to someone not living there, because it's like it's uniquely what's impacting their day-to-day functioning. And so
Mm.
for that, like I don't have a lot of glossy after pictures, and
Right.
I
Yep.
won't win design awards or be featured in magazines, and I am okay with that, because I know the lane that I'm in is impactful, and I know that the clients that I've worked with are living in homes with more ease and joy and relief than
Yeah.
before. So yeah, I feel very comfortable referring clients on if I feel like the scope of what I can offer is not within my wheelhouse. But I do hope that parents feel like when they reach out to me and they're assessing the fit, that they appreciate my relational approach. They appreciate that I'm there person to person, not just there to like say this is my solution. I'm
Mm.
not going to collaborate with you on that. I want to hear your ideas. I want to really understand how your family really lives. I understand your budget constraints. I understand your time
Yeah.
constraints, your mental load. So we'll work at your pace. And so I think when I kind of break down some of those barriers for what assumptions people have made, they go, oh, okay, like this is something that I can work with, and this is something that's going to help me.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned budget there, and I think that that could be a big thing as well. Because I mean, when I think interior design, I do think like, glossy images and like picture perfect, very expensive furniture. And I think that could be a real barrier to people trying to get help to fix up their home because, the interior designer is probably going to recommend something really expensive, like really expensive pieces of furniture that I wouldn't buy anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
I do have families who come to me who say like, "Oh yeah, I did speak to a designer and they said I needed to spend, $5,000 on this light pendant for my house to be beautiful." And
yeah, no.
and I just go, "Well, I'm sure it would look beautiful, but there's also so many options, between 0 and $5,000 that
Mm,
would be beautiful and that is going to meet your needs of your home." So I think it's like it's not about me putting my stamp on it and saying I know it's right and
mm,
I need it to look unlivable. Like I love it when homes look lived in and it's clear that children live there. And yeah, I think like design exists on a spectrum, obviously. So when you do have a really big project and you are overhauling your home and renovating, it's really important to honour the pricing of those people providing real expertise around that because they're managing risk and real complexity.
mm,
And I know lots of women driven industries and creative industries often have to justify their value and worth. So I'm not here to shut down anyone who's doing work that's different to mine. I think we can
mm,
learn a lot from each other. It's just that I've niched myself elsewhere
mm,
so that
mhm,
I can try and save my clients some time and mental effort.
mhm,
Because I think if you've if you've ever had to research something for your house, you're trying to buy something, it takes hours and hours
mhm.
trying to find the right
Oh, and then you
thing.
just give up, I
Yeah, they
find.
give up,
Yeah,
or you go like, I think this is right, but I don't feel confident enough to,
buy it.
to buy it and
Mm,
really execute it, so I just won't do it. So that can be where it's worthwhile outsourcing because your time is currency too.
mhm.
So I think it's acknowledging that not all interior design is the same. That's the kind of where I want people to understand is like, don't make the assumption that everyone's doing the same thing because there's a really broad spectrum in the industry.
Yeah. I think what you're offering is quite unique though. Like I haven't really come across, any other interior design that sort of speaks to families and understands the chaos, um, and can help really, I think.
Certainly, yeah, the conversations that I tend to have in the
Mm.
playground or when I'm meeting new school parents and I tell them what I do, they go, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that's amazing. That's so
Yeah.
necessary." And I've never heard anyone doing that. So that's I'm sure it's really needed. And I was like, yeah, but every parent I speak to is like, yes, please help me.
Yeah, so it's not just me, hey? Um,
Definitely not.
this might be a very general question, but would you be able to give parents in general, or say for me, for example, some tips on how to improve, like some very general tips on how to improve our living environment?
Yes, that's a good question
Mm,
because most families assume that improving their home means big changes when
mm,
it's often some of those smaller tips and tricks that can make a
mm.
big difference.
I'd
So,
love some.
yeah, definitely take some
Mm.
notes. So, step one, start with regulation over aesthetics. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is like understanding that every person in a home has different sensory needs and energy levels.
Mm.
Even for someone who's not neurodivergent or sensory sensitive, everyone experiences their homes differently. So, the question becomes like on a really busy hard day, what does our home need to do to support everyone in the family?
Mhm.
What would we need to do to make it more enjoyable, flow better, feel better for everyone? So just kind of starting to notice those things around regulation or at which time points in the day or which transitions or which activities you're doing where dysregulation starts to emerge. And by dysregulation I mean, agitation, silliness, all those
Mm.
sort of big swings in moods, that kind of thing.
Mm. Irritation for parents, would that be one?
Irritation, yeah, irritability, yes, parental
Mm-hmm.
dysregulation,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Like how do we make our home better support the 5 to 7 p.m. window? How do
Mm-hmm.
we, that kind of thing. So I think just starting to notice those key points and then working out, well, what does each person in these time window periods really need? And then zooming out, what could the home or this particular space more specifically do to help with that?
Mm-hmm.
The second one I would say is probably designing for independence, making a big difference, and just making small changes that you can scaffold with your child as they get older. So for example, like, bag hooks being at their height, having a drawer in the kitchen that has all of their crockery and cutlery so that they can set the table, having
Mm.
a step stool that they can wash their hands by themselves. When they're little, it's sort of those little activities and those little changes that can make a big difference as they get older. They understand that they can start to do more of those things by themselves and the parents aren't carrying every step of the routine on their own.
Mm-hmm.
I would say being flexible matters more than being perfect because families are always changing. So thinking about layouts not being
Mm.
fixed or having
Mm-hmm.
systems that can kind of tolerate mess and chaos, but also reset really quickly, or making decisions that don't lock you into something over time. So, acquiring furniture in a kid's bedroom kind of bit by bit so that if their needs change, you haven't sort of lock yourself into that and you can stage it as you get to know them more and their needs change with
Mm-hmm.
time and they can
Mm.
like last longer and be a bit more future proofed, I would say.
Mm. So be willing to change it up.
Yeah, I think like even the example of, if you're identifying that you need some storage and you're trying to decide whether you invest in custom built-in storage or something that's flat packed and freestanding,
Mm.
the lens of, is this going to be the fixed layout that we want to commit to forever,
Mm.
helps to kind of critique that decision. If you think you might need some flexibility, like for example, I was at a house the other day and the client was saying, I really want some built-in book shelving because we have a lot of books. And then in the same breath, she was like, oh, but this room might also become a spare room because my parents live interstate and I'd like them to
Mm.
have somewhere where they can stay. And so I said, well, if you make that wall a built-in bookshelf and that wall's got windows and that wall's got doors, then you've only got one wall where you could put a bed. And she was like, oh, that's a really good point. So like if we put bookshelves that can be moved around now, then maybe that can be fit for purpose now. But if we needed to accommodate a bed, we'd have more options for where the bed would go. Does that
Mm.
make sense? That kind
Yeah,
of like,
yeah. Yeah, yeah, that
flexibility.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, because you don't really think about, oh yeah, so there's only one spot that the bed can go otherwise.
Yeah, you need to work with the constraints of the
Mm.
room. You've got to look at a
Mm-hmm.
room and see where all those windows and doors and power points and heaters and cooling vents and fireplaces and cupboards are, to be able to go, well, you've got to work with those constraints. There might only be one spot you can put the furniture in that room that you have actually need, let alone
Mm.
the other stuff you might like in that room.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think like the last thing I probably leave families with is thinking about durability because that's a big part of reducing stress. So
Mm-hmm.
choosing materials that are forgiving, that factor in real life, that mean people can relax in their homes. So,
Mm.
if you're choosing dining chairs, you might not choose a fabric chair with young children. You might choose
Right.
something that's really easily wipeable. Or if you're
Yes.
acquiring a new couch, like really think about
No
if you've
white
got pets.
couches.
Yeah, no white couches or a white couch that has a small fleck in it, just so that that little
Oh,
added
yep.
layer of it's just a little bit more forgiving where
Mm.
for marks and stains or for a pet that likes to sleep on the couch like my dog does. And so, like, are you going to enjoy being in your living room if you're
Mm-hmm.
really stressed all of the time and uptight about something being spilled or a mark or a stain on that? Or
Yeah.
what would it feel like in contrast to have a fabric that you knew you could, a machine washable cover or a leather that can be wiped down, just thinking about what you want to get out of the space as the parent as well. So if you're acquiring new pieces, like just thinking about some of that durability and longevity and thinking about what's going to be easy for kids and teenagers and pets and all of
Mm.
the dirt and the mess and the grubbiness that tends to come in and out of the home.
Mm. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Like when you talk about it, it just makes so much sense.
I'm glad. I'm glad it's not just in my head.
No,
Yeah.
No, but it makes a lot of sense, but in a way that as busy working parents that you just wouldn't really think about. Um, as you know, like it takes a lot of bandwidth to organize things and constantly keep on top of the clutter, and because there's like a million other things I've got to do before I do that. So it makes little things like this make a lot of sense, like having bag hooks, like a place to put your bags. Like my daughter is constantly losing her glasses, her prescription glasses.
Mm.
So a place to put them might be a really good idea.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. And it's like it's achievable. It doesn't feel like this insurmountable task you have to add to your already long list. And
Mm,
I'd like to think that parents hear what I'm talking about and they go, oh, like that's really achievable. It's not beyond my scope. Like I want
mm,
to engage in these critical reflections. I love it when parents go, oh, I just didn't think about it like that. You know, like I
mm.
really value that thought
Yep.
partner work with them. And like the most important thing I leave families with is like your home doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be like real estate, staged home worthy to be beautiful and somewhere where you enjoy living. It just has to support
Mm,
your family's everyday life. And when I say your family, I mean your family, and that comparison part is just isn't helpful or productive for anyone when you are thinking about how your family and everyone in it exists and just focusing in your lane about what you and your children need day to day and making the choices kind of follow that lead.
mm. So if parents want your help, where would they find you, and what can you offer them?
So I'm happy to send you links that you can pop in the show notes and share with your audience about my website and my Instagram. So my website
Mm-hmm.
has everything on there about my different services. My Instagram, I'm often on there sharing sort of tips and tricks and
Mm,
critical reflections that people tend to enjoy and don't see anywhere else. So
mm,
that's a good way to sort of touch point with me if you are interested in what I'm doing or you want to find out more. I would say like my one-to-one services are available to most families in Melbourne and are usually my most valued service. But I also feel really passionate about education and knowledge and sharing with more people because as you're saying, like, oh, it just makes sense, and I wish more
mm,
parents could have these conversations and have access to it. And I don't think that should be limited to just one-to-one design support. And
mm,
I do truly appreciate the cost of living pressures at the moment. So I would like to share a new offering that I have, if that's okay.
sure.
Yeah. So I guess a lot of the things we've talked about and the things that I've been musing about for a number of years now have led me to thinking about what's beneficial for families like yours and like mine, and being able to connect with other like-minded parents about these ideas. And so I've created like a learning community-based membership called the Developing Home, which I'm launching next month.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope it's a place where parents like Melbourne Schools parents who are already really invested in their kids' development can come together and yeah, explore, dive deeper, ask questions of me, share their ideas with me, but also with each other in a really accessible way, whether they're in Melbourne or beyond. I hope that, it's something that means I can access families Australia wide and overseas as well. So
Mm,
I'd be happy to share the details and links with you to share with everyone because there will be a very attractive offer for founding members
mm,
as I open the doors to that.
Okay, no, that's awesome. Yeah, I'll share them in the show notes. And families can have a look there and think about joining your membership. That sounds great.
Absolutely. And look, I'm always available on Instagram for a DM if someone has a question or they just want
Mm,
to connect with me. And I always offer a discovery call for 15 minutes for free for anyone who just wants to get a fit check. They want to understand how I work or if something that they're dealing with is something that I can help them with. So that's an option that's available on my website as well.
oh, that's awesome. That's very generous, Penny. Is there anything that we haven't covered in this podcast that you'd like to talk about?
I think so. I think we've covered a lot of things and ideas, and I'm glad that they resonate with you because
Hmm.
you would be my ideal client,
I think I'm your
so we
target market.
exactly right. So I think just, for anyone who's feeling like unsure or dubious, just take the time to understand what I do, and there's probably a way I can help you even if you haven't thought of it yet.
Mm, that's great. Well, thank you for your time, Penny. Thanks for having a chat to me. And also, thank you for all your support in the Melbourne Schools group as well.
No, I'm very happy to be part of it, and I can tell by the community threads in there that the parents are a really invested bunch of
Mm.
individuals about their kids' learning development, their well-being overall. There's lots of really juicy questions in there, which I love to tap into and understand, because I think some of the dilemmas that parents are facing these days feel really complex, and it's really nice to crowdsource some solutions sometimes and know that you're
Mm.
not alone with it.
Yeah, yeah. And your expertise, with your expertise, I think it's really appreciated. So thank you.
Thanks, Crystal.
All right. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me on this podcast. Remember that the content that you hear on this podcast is of a general nature and should not be used to make any decisions about schools or anything else. If you want to learn more about schools in Melbourne, make sure you visit the website www.melbourneschools.com.au. You can also join thousands of other parents in our community at Melbourne Schools Discussion Group on Facebook. See you there.